It's Tuesday, May 10th. Welcome to Real Talk. Jesperson Hicks here with you in just a second. Sandy Garossino, a national columnist with Canada's National Observer. A great piece, and I love the title of it because it's just going to grab everybody's attention like I think it probably has in our promo tweet, the tweet we send out every morning from our Real Talk account at Real Talk RJ. Sandy inviting everybody yesterday when this thing was published to let's have an adult conversation about abortion. An adult conversation about abortion. What does that look like as everybody's talking about it based on this leaked or released Supreme Court decision out of the United States, an anticipated decision penned by Justice Samuel Alito? We'll find out from Sandy in just a second. Plus, in about a half hour's time on this show, buckle up for a conversation with the people behind and featured in one of the most powerful films I've ever seen. I watched it last night. I watched it less than 12 hours ago. It's still just banging around in my brain. Love in the Time of Fentanyl. It goes this Friday at NorthwestFest. That's Canada's longest-running documentary film festival. We'll talk to filmmaker Colin Askey and two of the people featured in this film. It is unbelievable storytelling around the opioid crisis in Canada, in particular, a startup, illegal drop-in overdose prevention resource, a site in Vancouver's downtown east side. I don't even know what to say about the film except you have to see it. We're going to share a bit of it with you today and, again, talk about some of the issues that have led to the situation right now that is claiming the lives. It's a health crisis, a full-blown health crisis of hundreds of people across Canada every single month, thousands of people every year. Over the past 25 years, a statistic in the film grabbed me and wouldn't let go last night. Over the past 25 years, 1 million people have died from overdose or drug poisoning in North America. 1 million people in the last 25 years. Meantime, in the last 35 years, at these supervised consumption services like Insight in downtown Vancouver, and we'll talk about that, not a single person has died from overdose. So not a single death in 35 years under supervision and care. 1 million deaths over the last 25 years in North America outside of those services. Sends a pretty clear message, doesn't it? We'll look for your thoughts on that. Plus, we'll review the unscientific, unofficial Twitter poll from yesterday on privacy and tracking and cell phones. An interesting development when we put that question out. It was a little bit more inflammatory than I thought it might be, which is always an interesting observation to make. We'll get into all that before the end of the show today. The Leading Edge coming up, presented by Leading Edge Physio. Because it's a Tuesday, because it's a weekday, this show is presented by our friends at Bitcoin. Well, Bitcoin has seen a drop across the board in crypto. The NASDAQ is down. Tech stocks are down. People are going, are these all correlated? Is this all related? What does this do to some of the political assertions around cryptocurrency? If you have questions like this, and you probably do, I recommend you take them to the staff like Benny at the Bitcoin Well. You can find them, Bitcoin Well, that is, under the sponsors tab on our website, RyanJesperson.com.
Real Talk starts right now. Here's Ryan Jesperson.
It was just a few days ago that the nominees were announced for Canada's Digital Publishing Awards. And one of those nominees is our next guest, so I look forward to congratulating her. I'm sure that several people already have, but it's always great to recognize the good work that journalists and columnists are doing in furthering conversations around important issues across Canada. Sandy Garossino is a former trial lawyer, and you've probably read her work in Canada's National Observer. She's been on the show several times talking about different issues that resonate with her, but it was this one yesterday, this column, that caught our eye. Let's have an adult conversation about abortion. You can read it yourself at nationalobserver.com. The author of that piece, an award nominee, Sandy Garossino, joining us from the West Coast, making it an early morning. We sure appreciate it. Thanks for getting up for us, Sandy, and it's nice to see your face again. I think we've got you on mute, Sandy.
Because I'm not getting great connection here.
You're not getting great connection?
Is it all right?
Yeah, it's coming through okay. It's decent, and we think it'll sort itself out, but you let me know, and if not, we can make the necessary adjustments. Congratulations on your nomination.
I hate to do this to you, but I'm just wondering if I should move to a different spot in the house or something, because this is like, for some reason, I'm not getting good.
No problem, Sandy. Take 5 and come back and join us when you can. Sandy Garossino, columnist for the National Observer. We'll get that figured out. Her piece, Let's Have an Adult Conversation About Abortion. I'll read a little bit from the piece, and I think that it's something, it's a conversation you want to be able to have, although this is one that, for obvious reasons, is a supercharged issue. It's an uncomfortable issue for a lot of people to talk about. As a matter of fact, just even in the realm of the orbit of talk shows, you don't see a lot of talk shows talking about abortion all the time. But what's happening in the United States, of course, has people talking about access to abortion in Canada and other countries, whether or not the United States, a decision from the Supreme Court could impact the politics or the public discussion or access to abortion in Canada. As a matter of fact, we, in partnership with our official research and strategy team at Y Station, have made that the subject of our question of the week this week. So if you go to ryanjesperson.com and if you click on Connect, under question of the week, you'll find it posed there. With the draft decision leaked last week, it seems clear that the United States Supreme Court will overturn Roe v. Wade, the landmark decision, a 1973 decision, by the way, on reproductive rights in the United States. We want to hear your thoughts on what impact this decision will have in Canada, the role of men in conversations and policy making about reproductive rights, and what this means for politics both here at home and across the border. That's our official question of the week, presented by Y Station. Of course, we'll leave it open through till Sunday night. Sunday afternoon, I think about 3 o'clock Mountain is where we cap it, 5 p.m. Eastern. We need to give their team enough time to put these reports together, and then we'll bring you the results of that early next week. These conversations will continue, of course, as people are paying very close attention to what's happening in the U.S. You've probably noticed that there are a lot of other initiatives going on as well in relation to this. Some might say that some lawmakers or some special interest or lobby groups have become more emboldened with this conversation around the Supreme Court, with this revelation, you might call it, around the Supreme Court. So there's talk about, for example, some folks in Congress or even senators talking about, should we limit access to the morning after pill? Should we make it illegal? Should we make it a felony to procure or attempt to procure the morning after pill? Plan B. In some states that have death penalties, there's talk about that. And people are going, what's even happening right now? There's some talk in some of the southern states about looking to limit birth control, access to birth control to married couples. I mean, people are going, this is absolutely outrageous right now. It feels like something that would be in The Onion, but it is happening right now. And so this is why we want to have these conversations. Take a look at our live chat, and Randy says, talk about abortion, says it's only uncomfortable for social conservatives and the religious right, Jespo. Maybe. I don't know. I've just always personally been wired to kind of feel like it's really none of my business, to sort of feel like it's a conversation that a lot of people should just kind of stay out of. But Sandy Garossino, who joins us now live, actually kind of argues the opposite. As a matter of fact, in just outside the lead of her column at nationalobserver.com, she writes, while women don't need men telling them what to do with their own bodies, it would certainly help if the millions of guys who've personally benefited from their freedom would say so. Sandy joining us live this morning, and it looks like through a crystal clear connection, though I shouldn't jinx us. Thanks for making time for us. Good morning to you, my friend.
Thanks so much for having me on, Ryan.
Yes.
Sorry about the
disconnect. Don't sweat it. It's a way better move to adjust early and get a rock-solid connection so we can have an uninterrupted conversation. You approach this from a perspective in your column, Sandy. You want to have an adult conversation about abortion. Where has that been lacking in your estimation in past? How do we make it an adult conversation?
Well, I think there's been so much shame that's been this has just been so drenched in shame and women not wanting to come forward and say what's really going on in their lives, and men too. I mean, every pregnancy involves a man, but we'd hear nothing from the men who are benefiting from this very standard, ordinary procedure, very common procedure, and women are not talking about it very much because I think the Christian right and maybe society in general has been is just so reluctant. We're squeamish about sex at all. And then when the Christian right and its disapproval of ordinary adult human sexuality that we all know from our own personal experience. Look, most pregnancies, unplanned pregnancies, are not the result of rape or incest. They're not violent. They're people who fucked up. They made mistakes. Something happened unplanned. Maybe it was a Saturday night. Maybe something just went wrong and an accident happened. I mean, women are fertile for much of their lives, and men are fertile all the time, and things happen. We have to work hard to prevent pregnancy from happening. But ordinary adults engage in healthy, happy sexuality, and sometimes they have accidents. And as a result, unplanned pregnancies are dealt with all the time, and they are dealt with much in the same way as I think that we deal with medically assisted deaths sometimes, where, physicians will tell you that the reality is not what people's perception is. There's a lot more that happens. So my perspective is, can we just get rid of the shame and stop pretending that we all are only having sex within marriage and only doing it with the people we should do it with and all that, and just really talk about it normally? Because this is an extremely common thing that happens to women, and it's extremely common for them to terminate an unplanned pregnancy, far more common than the average person, I think, realizes.
It's kind of funny, as you were relocating in your place, and I was commenting and reading what I'm seeing on our live chat, Sandy, and kind of teeing up what we're going to talk about. And I just say, I go, this is kind of a controversial issue. It's a hot button issue. It can be an emotional issue. It can be an uncomfortable issue. And right away on the live chat, some viewers, I happened to see a comment from Randy, I'm sure there were others too, said it's not uncomfortable for everybody. It's uncomfortable for social conservatives or for the religious right. And I kind of went, okay, yeah, sure, fair enough. But and maybe that's just sort of the context that I see it through. Maybe that was part of my experience. It's always felt like an extremely serious issue where you're talking about the sanctity of life, and you're talking about people's right and all this kind of stuff. And then now, even especially over the past couple of weeks, with this story out of the United States, where I'm noticing that this is like mainstream conversation that virtually everybody seems to be talking about, and it feels a little bit unusual. Do you get the same sense?
I do, and I hope that we really just kind of open this up and quit pretending that this is this terrible, terrible thing. I mean, yeah, it's not great. Nobody likes it. Almost all abortions happen to young women under 30, almost all of them, because people get their acts together and they kind of work things out, and then they don't have accidents anymore. Maybe they're not partying so much on Saturday night, but can we please quit pretending that this is there's this attitude that we're supposed to take it as this terrible, terrible thing. All of this is cloaked in drama. And the only reason that we should be thinking about this is because of rape and incest. No, this is just regular human life. And this is how adults live. This is the lived reality. Just to make my point a little bit further, Ryan, about 1 woman in 4 in the United States will have an abortion by the time she reaches menopause. That's twice the rate of breast cancer among all women for their whole lives. Abortion is more common than knee replacement surgery. This is the reality. This is what we're doing in life. This is how people are living. And you could say, well, this is a terrible, terrible thing, but this is the reality that people have been living, and women have been living this reality for millennia. This is what we do.
You already know what critics that see or hear this interview even will say, or critics of yours that read your column will say, Garossino's trying to normalize abortion. Why do you think that it's important or integral to have this conversation? Why is it important to have the adult conversation about this?
Because it's not me normalizing it. This is acknowledging the reality of lived experience for ordinary adults everywhere. And not only that, this would be a disaster, an actual economic disaster. It would be really great to see an analysis of the economic impact of all of these pregnancies going to term. About 900,000 to 1 million, depending on the year, women in the United States exercise their freedom and terminate a pregnancy. That's almost 1 million a year annually. So now let's just think about that. These are almost all young people. So, and it costs about $250,000 to raise a child, just to 17 in the United States, not including education. So about 1 million, so a million times, or 900,000 times 250,000, you're talking hundreds of billions of dollars that are being would be foisted on the shoulders of young people that can barely afford their rent. And this is going to be foisted on their shoulders for the rest of their lives, or they're going to put these kids up for adoption. Well, how many kids get adopted every year? About 135,000. So there's 6 times as many abortions as there are adoptions. You're going to, if this whole idea, oh, well, people can adopt. Well, no, they're not going to adopt in those numbers. And most of the children, most of the children that are the result of these pregnancies are not, your nice blonde-haired kids, so-called, that the adoption families are generally seeking. This is the ordinary lived life of Americans, and these kids are not going to get adopted. So you're going to get hungry kids. You're going to get kids on the street, or your child services are going to be completely overwhelmed with these pregnancies or with these children. And we're going to be pushing women back into the Stone Age. We know that childcare is an economic driver. We know that it drives prosperity, it drives incomes up, it helps the economy. Now imagine reverse. Now imagine taking women out of the workforce that would otherwise be in the workforce, or out of education that would otherwise be advancing their skills. This would be an economic disaster of staggering proportion to take these rights away from everybody.
Nothing that you're saying is wrong. I mean, statistically, you're saying that, there'd be 900,000 pregnancies terminated. Is that what you said? 900,000 in the U.S. every year?
Yeah.
That number is staggering. And I can see that number being presented in different ways, obviously, with regards to messaging. For some people, that's it's also gone down in recent years, but not because of less access to abortion, but because of more contraception, and because younger people are having more control of their sex lives. Yeah, and then I was mentioning this as just before you and I got started. Now, this stuff is not law, and these are just ruminations, but we're seeing some emboldened lawmakers in the United States, in particular in the Bible Belt in the southern U.S., starting to talk about things like outlawing Plan B, outlawing the morning after pill, limiting access to birth control. It just sounds to me in combination with what the Supreme Court appears to be set to rule on, it's a disaster waiting to happen. And that's the part that I think it's safe to say millions of people are having a very difficult time wrapping their mind around.
Well, yeah. I mean, this is going to affect everybody's life. And it's going to affect men's lives too. And this is one of the things that, we've kind of conditioned men to stay out of this conversation. What we really want is for them not to tell women what to do. But the reality is that this benefits millions and millions of men. It benefits their lives. I mean, for as much as there's the odd yahoo out there saying, you're going to have my baby and all that kind of stuff, how many men are actually relieved, or even more, pressuring for their girlfriend to have, or their partner to have, to terminate an unwanted pregnancy?
Sandy, when you talk about the role that men should play, we do a question of the week every week. People can go to ryanjesperson.com, connect, and then they answer the question of the week. And one of the angles on that question, put together by Y Station, our research and strategy firm, is the role that men should play in the conversation or in lawmaking or what have you. And typically, I've felt like the quick answer, the succinct answer is get out of the way. Or just shut up. If it's not your body, just get out of the way. But you argue that it would help if the millions of guys who've personally benefited from the freedom would say so. And I would imagine you wouldn't just limit it to men that have had, by association, a personal connection to this either. What role do you see men playing in the conversation?
Well, speak up about the damage that this is going to cause, the damage that this is, that removing this freedom from a woman's life and from everybody's life, because, in theory, this is a burden, an economic burden that could get foisted on men, an unwanted burden. I mean, imagine somebody, registering a $250,000 charge on you for the rest of the next 20 years to raise a kid. That's theoretically possible. These affect everybody. And so I think it's, like I say, I don't think that men or anybody, no matter what your gender is, should be telling a woman what she should do with her own body. That's her business entirely. But if you benefited from it, if your son got somebody pregnant and you're terribly relieved that got terminated, say so. Let's speak up and let's quit with shaming people and pretending that life is different from what it really is like.
Yeah, there still is that. There are those moments, and it's becoming sort of more and more quote unquote normal, or more and more of a regular occurrence to hear someone step in front of a microphone or in front of a group of people say, "I had an abortion," and oftentimes they'll talk about the year or the circumstance, or maybe they won't. But that disclosure, I think, goes a long way in providing context for those conversations. But you didn't typically see that as much anymore. And you do see that conversation evolving, and you do see the conversation changing. When it comes to the impact that you think this story out of the U.S. and this momentum out of the U.S. could have in Canada, a lot of people are saying, well, this is fear-mongering. Alberta's premier the other day didn't want to comment on it. He said, I'm not going to comment on a hypothetical decision that may be made by a foreign court in another land, and tried to create as much distance as he could, did Jason Kenney, from answering that question. Do you foresee a tangible impact in Canada? I mean, the stories are a little bit different, right? Here, it's not so much about legislation. Here, it's more about access to abortion. I see the conversations take a different tone, but where do you see this going?
Didn't Jason Kenney recently go to the United States to try and get the Americans to pressure Canada and to get that Keystone pipeline going and pressure Canadians to get behind the Keystone pipeline? I feel like there's something that happened there. But anyway, because of the jurisdiction, because it's not just the legality and the decriminalization of abortion, but it's also about access to abortion services. And that is a provincial jurisdiction issue. So it absolutely affects, and it is a matter for premiers to get engaged in. Women need to have this service available to them. And by the way, 40% of terminations are medical or are medication. You just take a prescription, and that's how almost all the early term abortions take place. But we all know that whatever happens in the United States, and especially from the Christian right, does work its way into Canadian policy. And I believe that Jason Kenney was an anti-abortion activist in the United States when he was there as a student in San Francisco. So I think that we all have to be aware that absolutely the anti-abortion forces, the campaign Life in Canada, would be thrilled and delighted for conservative politicians to start being supportive. But we also have to remember, every one of those Supreme Court justices lied about their intention under oath in their confirmation hearing. So I don't trust anybody who's on the conservative side of things generally speaking, to fully tell the truth about what their intentions are if the political winds change. An awful lot of the GOP candidates right now are dancing to the anti-abortion tune, because that's the reality of the GOP. You have to be anti-abortion or you have no political future. So a lot of them who used to be for freedom of choice for women and reproductive freedom are not now.
You can read Sandy Garossino's piece, Let's Have an Adult Conversation About Abortion, in Canada's National Observer at nationalobserver.com. Hey, congratulations on your nomination for a Digital Publishing Award. That's a big deal.
Thanks so much. I don't know how much I pay attention to these things, but everybody tells me it's a big deal. So
yeah.
That's exciting.
Well, hey, it's always nice to see your name on the list, Sandy, and it's always nice to have you here on the show. We appreciate you waking up early for us on the West Coast.
Thanks so much.
You got it. Sandy Garossino, former trial lawyer, and of course, a well-read columnist, an award-nominated columnist for Canada's National Observer. We should mention that Max Fawcett, who you hear on this show as well from time to time, also recognized for his work in political commentary. So congratulations to both Sandy and Max. Again, our Real Talk Get Real, we call it, our question of the week, asks for your take on this story. And we look forward to hearing from so many of you. You do have an opportunity to rip through in about 1 minute. Answer that question at ryanjesperson.com under the Connect link. But if you want, you can take a bit more time. We leave some areas where we typically ask you anything else, and then you can just fill in the blanks and you can unload on what it is that you've been wanting to say or what you'd like to see us put in front of Real Talkers. Don't forget, while we review the results of the question of the week every week, our Patreon supporters, and you can learn more about that on our website, also receive the full Top Line report, which is typically like 15 to 20 pages of all that data, that curated data, including your comments, some really neat and fascinating statistical insights into where the audience is at. And that's just one of the ways that we say thank you to our Patreon supporters for covering us. And, of course, for making us, putting us in a position where we can continue to work to bring you the real talk. Coming up in just under 10 minutes, maybe under 5, depending on how quickly we can line this up. There's always so much going on behind the scenes. We're going to talk to the team behind an unbelievably powerful film that'll be debuting tonight, as a matter of fact, at the Doxa Festival. It's a world premiere tonight, and then on Friday, it screens in person in our home city of Edmonton at the Metro Cinema at the Garneau. That's part of the amazing lineup at NorthwestFest. That's coming up in just a bit. Before we get there, I want to remind you that Kubi Energy is hiring right now. That's what they want to make sure everybody knows. If you're a skilled worker, if you're a tradesperson, if you have your ticket, if you're an electrician in particular, they're currently hiring. As a matter of fact, they're almost always hiring. That's how much the demand is growing with this company that's been covering solar installations, big and small, across Western Canada for about a decade now. Not a big, boring corporation where you're just a cog in the machine. You, as a team member at Kubi, make a direct impact to the company and, in a bigger picture, to clean energy development in Canada. So you work for an awesome company. They offer you a tool and boot allowance. There's an employee referral program, so if you know other great potential staffers, you could benefit from that. So could they. Even a Bitcoin investment savings plan. Different kinds of things that are attracting the best installers, salespeople, lead structural engineers, and others to Kubi through kubienergy.ca/careers. Park Power is your friendly local utilities provider. I always like to mention these two companies together because Park Power and Kubi have collaborated on something. Park's got a great solar rebate buyback program where they're going to pay you way more per kilowatt hour than the other big power providers. So when your system is churning along, creating, or harvesting more energy than you need to use, you can sell it back. It goes on your account and it saves you money even through the winter months. It's just one of the reasons why Park Power should be your go-to for electricity, natural gas, and internet across the province of Alberta. You can compare rates, get into their frequently asked questions, and most importantly, sign up at parkpower.ca. The promo code 2022-RealTalk gets you $70 off your first bill. Eden Landscaping is bringing outdoor spaces to life, a custom landscape builder, more than 20 years of on-the-ground experience in Edmonton and across the greater Edmonton region. If you go to landscapeedmonton.ca, you click on services. This is a great way to get a sense of exactly what they do. So maybe in your world, it's edible garden boxes that you're looking at doing. Everybody's doing those now. Hey, Johnny, I'm seeing people, they got their tomatoes going in already.
They're all the rage.
Some people are wondering, there was like this tiny little dusting of snow in our neck of the woods last night. What does that mean for those of you that are already getting your veggies in? They do excavation, leveling ground, removing greenery, whatever you need. Eden Landscaping's got you covered at landscapeedmonton.ca. And of course, we want to mention Friesen Brothers. Number one, most importantly, the first of the month has to be circled on your calendar. If you live anywhere near a Friesen Brothers, there's 16 of them across Alberta. On the first of every month, $75 or more in grocery purchases earns you 15% off the whole tab, which is great. Plus, they've got you covered for grilling season. All the Alberta protein you need, including a whole bunch of non-meat options, plant-based options at friesen.com. Yesterday, we told you about a story that was reported in the National Post, and people were talking about the federal government through the Public Health Agency of Canada trying to get information, endeavoring to make evidence-based decisions. So they wanted information on Canadians' habits. Were more people or fewer people, we already know the answer to that, were more people or fewer people going to the liquor store during the pandemic shutdown? So what impact was it having on Canadians' behavior or health-related activities? Were people gathering in person, in groups, or were people more inclined to stay home and keep to themselves? How many people were going to the pharmacies? What did demand look like there? Perhaps some insight into where people were going to get masks or to get other PPE or what have you. The Public Health Agency of Canada, through procuring this data collected by a third-party group called Blue Dot. Of course, this was put in front of the Ethics Committee by Parliamentary Secretary Adam Van Koevert, and we have a request in with him, and we hope to speak with him. It got people talking about how Canadians traveling to pharmacies, liquor stores, family gatherings tracked via their phones. That's how it worked. Now, officials say the data was kept anonymous. In other words, it wouldn't say John Smith from this address went to this pharmacy at this time to buy this item, but it would show that perhaps 44%, I'm making this up, 44% more people went to this specific pharmacy or this specific location. Those numbers up over 2 weeks ago. So anonymized data helped inform public health decisions through the pandemic. We linked to the story in our unofficial, unscientific Twitter poll yesterday, and then we simply asked, are you cool with this? And we gave you three options. Yes, data is important. No, I'd feel violated, or I'm not sure how I feel. And the numbers, Johnny, kind of held true overnight, through the entire poll. Like they established about 3,200 people voted in total, 3,216. Just under, like a hair under 40% said, yeah, I'm cool with it. Data's important. 39.8%. 36.9, let's call it 37. So let's say 40% and then 37. 37% say I'm not cool with it. I'd feel violated. And then 23% said I'm not sure how I feel.
That's where I am. That's where I'm landing.
Yeah. What I thought was really interesting about this is that the poll actually ended up coming across as a little bit more inflammatory or controversial or triggering than I thought it would be.
I didn't think it did either, but that's kind of what the response was.
Yeah. So when we put it together, and when I put it together yesterday in the morning, right before we went live on the show, again, the wording, just Canadian traveling to pharmacy, liquor stores, they were tracked via their phones. Officials say it was kept anonymous, helped inform public health decisions. Are you cool with this? Yes, no, or I'm not sure how I feel. But it was really interesting to see a lot of the blowback. People were accusing me of gaslighting. People were accusing me of trying to further a certain narrative, a right-wing narrative, an anti-Trudeau narrative. And I kind of went, whoa. We're just trying to get a sense of where people are at with this. But the biggest trend in the responses, and I appreciate when you leave a comment on these polls, I hope that you vote too. I hope you vote and leave a comment. But many of you kind of just went, it's just kind of part of how it goes now. Like, whether you know it or not, whether you like it or not, if you sign up for these apps, or if you haven't turned off your location services, or if you've read your terms of service with regards to, the cell phone company. I mean, who reads the terms of service? But you probably should. Then people would say, well, it shouldn't be any surprise to you.
Sure.
Right? This information is being collected about you all the time. The government just procured it. The government just paid for it. The government just accessed information that's already being collected. Like Steve said, I don't really have an issue with the website tracking unique visitors. If tracking is truly anonymously aggregated, it's no different, but I am absolutely suspicious that things are not as described. It's probably a fair comment. Barry says, we all know data is being collected to try and influence how we spend our money, and I think most people accept that, but should a government body use that information to enact laws that control our movement? Lady Bach says, do you use a debit card, a credit card? You're being tracked by non-government sources all the time. You want to remain anonymous? Ditch your cell phone. Pay with cash. Oh, and also be mindful of all the cameras out there, plus satellites. Ashley says, I don't like being tracked by the government, but I'm much more concerned that unaccountable private companies do it every day. I think that's a great point.
Yeah.
Ashley says, at least I can vote against the government. We do have some rights. Facebook and Google can collect and sell data about me with no recourse. Chrissy says, newsflash, credit card company historical data was the precursor to detailing daily traffic. This is old news. My man DSP, Dan St. Pierre, chiming in, says, who cares? He says, who cares? That one kind of jumped out at me. I was like, Dan, do you really mean who cares? He says, our every move is tracked nowadays, either online by algorithms or offline by the GPS on our mobile devices. And Dan's probably not wrong about, well, he's not wrong about that. It feels like everybody's moves are tracked everywhere these days. The question is, are you cool with it? That was the question we asked yesterday. Not is it happening, not is it inevitable, but are you cool with it? Right? Like, keep in mind the options we gave you. Yes, data is important. That acknowledges the importance of data. No, I'd feel violated. We could have gone with I'd feel creeped out, or I'm not sure how I feel. So those are the options we gave you. So Dan airs or sides with the who cares. Data's important. Teresa says, wait until people find out about Facebook, right? There's a reason they send you ads about gardening right after you thought about gardening. That always weirds me out, Teresa. We were telling a story a while ago about talking about getting a new toaster, and then you sign on and you're doing whatever you're doing, a Google search or you're on your Facebook, and then these ads for toasters are popping up and you're going, they are listening. Kelly Optra says data's been collected and purchased for years. Stores, cell phones, GPS in cars. This is not new nor exclusive. Corporations and government analysts use it for trends. And Jonas says if you carry a phone that has location services enabled, you've essentially consented to this kind of thing. And that's the whole idea around the opting in versus opting out. So if you've not turned off location services, you have essentially consented to this kind of thing. I thought the numbers were interesting. 40% are cool with it, 37% are not, and 23% don't know how they feel. Do you roll with, like, you got your location services on, Find My iPhone, like all that kind of stuff? Would you be the easiest man to track in Canada?
Yeah, I think we all would be, but I used to be the same kind of person who was like afraid of the government and Big Brother, and now I'm like, I just need to get to freezing bros. You
got to have your Google Maps ready to go.
It's inevitable, and like you were saying about reading, your terms of service, I don't think anyone does, and most social media companies now, I mean, they don't just have access to your information. A lot of them, Instagram, if you read, they legally can take your photos and use them in advertisements. I mean, you're not even aware of it, but if you read closely, Facebook as well can use your information and your data in any way they please.
Yeah. I mentioned a conversation, this was a few shows ago, that I was having with some people off air, just a candid conversation. And it was people from different generations, right? A couple of the people in the conversation in their early 30s, a couple of people in their later 40s, early 50s, and the debate around whether or not it's a generational pushback, right?
Is this the sandwich generation you're always talking about?
Well, the sandwich, like, I'm not yet in the sandwich generation, but at some point, this is, the folks that are caring for their kids and caring for their parents at the same time. But in the context of surrendering privacy or surrendering data or personal information, maybe it is that how do I put it this way? Older people or people, in their 40s, 50s, 60s and up are a little more concerned about this type of thing, where maybe younger people have grown up in a culture of sharing.
Yeah.
Where, it maybe started with things like Squarespace, or not Squarespace, Foursquare. What was the one where you're the mayor of a certain place?
Yeah.
You're basically telling people, I go to this coffee shop more than anybody else. And you would announce where you're going, where you are, where you'll be.
And then Tumblr really took that a step further. Tumblr was really like a blog of your life. And then after that, of course, Facebook, Instagram. And now I think you're right, though. Like, certain generations are just more used to it than others and don't care as much. And I think, Gen X, Gen Z, obviously millennials, we're kind of used to it. But those people, I think, are kind of on the, in the middle where I am with, I don't feel great about it, but it helps me in my life to use location services. It helps me to use this data. And I think it can be used for good, but it's always can fall into the wrong hands. And it is creepy when you get those ads, eh?
Yeah. Let us know what you think about this. Talk at RyanJesperson.com. If this feels like maybe a trash talk submission for you coming up on Friday, you can get whatever you need off your chest. Send us an email to talk at RyanJesperson.com. In just 1 minute, we're going to talk to the filmmaker and two of the people featured in one of the most powerful films, not that I've seen this year, one of the most powerful films that I have ever seen. It makes its world premiere tonight on the West Coast at Doxa, and Friday it goes at NorthwestFest in our home city of Edmonton at the Metro Cinema at the Garneau. Here is a clip from Love in the Time of Fentanyl.
We've got our positive for fentanyl on our dipstick. I'm going to let it dry just a little more, but the negative is coming in on the benzo. 2 lines, the strip closest to me means negative for benzos. 1 line on the strip closest to you means positive for fentanyl.
Oh yeah, new people meet me over here. It's important to note that this isn't traditional employment, okay? It's a volunteer position, okay, with a paid honorarium. It's not quick money and it's not lucrative, but it is an opportunity to respond to a crisis in your community, to care for loved ones, and for some people replace a hustle, right? That is often criminalized, like boosting or sex trade or whatever it may be, that ends up putting people in a negative cycle. Thank you. All of the staff here are current drug users or former, all right? So they're people with lived experience. Acknowledging that people use, right? We ask that they don't use on their shift and use up to a maintenance level. Like if you have to use, you take 5 minutes and get back to work, but let people know around you that you're doing that. Cool? Thanks, everyone. Yeah, see you then. Yeah. Thank you.
That was the voice of Ronnie Grigg that you're hearing there. If you're listening to this on the podcast, you just saw him. If you're watching us on YouTube, Ronnie, a longtime frontline harm reduction worker in Vancouver's downtown east side, mainly focused on supervised consumption sites. He's had the opportunity to work, train, and consult support with harm reduction organizations in a number of places across Canada, the U.S., and Mexico, primarily at the pioneering supervised consumption sites Insight and the Vancouver Overdose Prevention Site. He started a harm reduction nonprofit called Zero Block Society for harm reduction worker support. Support the work, support the workers. We're going to get to know Ronnie over these next number of minutes. This film is put together by Colin Askey, a filmmaker who spent the last 10 years or so documenting the transformative impact of humane policy on the lives of people who use drugs. Colin's recent work includes the film Haven in 2019. That was an award-winning short doc about North America's first heroin-assisted treatment program in Vancouver. And we're also joined by Trey Agnew this morning. Trey is a former heroin worker, a former heroin user, and thief by trade. Currently the GM of the Overdose Prevention Society, known as OPS. He's now helping others, says Trey, as a means to try and balance his years of accumulated bad karma. He resides in Strathcona beside Vancouver's downtown east side, enjoys punk rock music. So he says dirty people and filth.
Nice. So we've got Trey here as well, but we're just going to do audio only until he figures out his video.
Okay, good stuff. We'll go to Trey in just a second. Let me welcome, with a warm welcome, the three of you. Ronnie, you're one of the featured people in this documentary. It takes you through, I guess, what might be 2 or 3 weeks or perhaps a couple of months in the life of somebody working in the downtown east side in harm reduction. From the first second of this film, I was absolutely captivated as a viewer trying to understand this health crisis in Canada. For you, this is just everyday life. I mean, this is going to impact people that are unfamiliar with the downtown east side or this crisis in a big way, but this has been your wheelhouse for years.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Ryan. And it's a pleasure to meet you both and a pleasure to be here. Yeah, and it's, I'm really, as you said, it is illuminating the work that is done, that has been done for a number of years, and for that I'm grateful. We work in obscurity, And so to have a light shone on it is a positive thing.
It's I don't want to spoil too much about the film. I want to make sure that people see it, but it's absolutely remarkable to see you and the volunteers and the staff that you work with calmly and matter-of-factly training for and then responding to drug poisonings, to overdoses on almost a daily basis. But a statistic at the end of the film struck me as most powerful, and that is in more than 3 decades of harm reduction across the country, and for that matter, around the world, there's no documented deaths in supervised consumption services. In other words, the work is working. Yet it does not remain a main or major approach when it comes to governments across this country right now. It's an issue that's still, I think, demanding to be respected when it comes to how governments and public health bodies are approaching this opioid crisis.
Yeah, absolutely. Stigma is strong, and that's one of the battles. It's interesting to be speaking to people outside of the community of the downtown east side, because in some ways it isn't a mystery to us how to react, how to respond, how to care, and what's important, and it becomes normalized. You mentioned the calmness, and that happens, and it's really an expectation in this community that people are prepared to respond, that people care, that people advocate, that people have been impacted by it. But I got to admit, it's a little bit shocking to have to translate that a little bit outside of this experience. I also live in the neighborhood and have for a number of years, for 15 plus years, and raised my family here as well.
I want to welcome Trey Agnew to the conversation. Trey is currently the general manager of the Overdose Prevention Society. And Trey, I might be guilty of taking a word from you, and that's not very real of me in a show called Real Talk, because the bio that you gave us describes you, in your words, as a former junkie and thief by trade. And I've been told many times that the word junkie is certainly not preferred. As a matter of fact, it's often used as a slur or a word that brings with it almost sort of heavy judgment. But you invoke that word in describing yourself. Can you take us into the stigma and your personal experience?
I can say that word because I am one. So, yeah, I don't know. I mean, I'm sorry, I'm just driving my kid to school right now. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think of it more of as a term of endearment. I mean, I guess there's a lot of PC stuff going around these days, and I'm gonna sound like a jerk, but I mean, like, I can't handle everyone being so sensitive all the time, right? And I've never written any kind of professional bio for myself, so when I was asked to do that, you can see I take myself really seriously, right? Like, I have no professional background or anything. I'm a high school dropout, but the reality of it is that the years that I spent on the street doing criminal activity to pay for my drug addiction was a school within itself. And I've been on committees, across Canada, sharing my experience as a drug user and the J word as a junkie. And like a lot of these people on committees are scientists. They're people with like CSIS and the Canadian military, top dogs in police organizations, ambulance places, and like fire committees. And like I had a lot of feelings like these people have actual educations, and like they own homes, and like there was a lot of comparing. But the reality is that I had like imposter complex or imposter syndrome, and that my education on the street is just as good as a Harvard education for some, because these people never understand what it's like to be a drug user and have to find means to provide money for yourself to get drugs. And the really great thing about ops is that it's a safe employment opportunity, right? Like ops didn't exist when I was a drug user. I had to, do things that I didn't really necessarily want to do to get money for drugs. But today, places like ops and peer employment, we create safe opportunities for drug users. So it's a really good thing, right? Have a good day at school.
This feels like the most real talk ever. Like Trey is talking. This is not lost on me. You're talking about, arguably Canada's biggest health crisis. I hate to try to compare COVID-19 and the opioid crisis because it doesn't make sense to do so. We need to have the bandwidth to address both, but you're talking about that so matter-of-factly and dropping your kid off school. Did you ever think, like Trey, and by the way, we should mention, you talked about your high school dropout and you have this imposter syndrome, and we'll talk to Colin about the actual aesthetic and putting the film together in just a second, but Trey, you're a brilliant artist, and a lot of your work is featured on Vancouver's downtown east side in these powerful murals that say so much, and you have an incredible talent there. Did you ever think that when you were in, let's say 5, 10, 15 years ago, that you'd ever be in a position as the general manager of a harm reduction service, dropping your kid off at school? I mean, how far away was that sort of a reality from you back in the day?
No, I never thought that would ever happen. I mean, the reality of that is still kind of lost on me. That I'm really, I don't know how it happens, but it's great.
Colin, this from your perspective as a storyteller, I have to say, like, with regards to the composition of the film and how it's stunningly shot. You use silence in a way that not a lot of filmmakers can. I mean, it's just so incredibly powerful. I was literally sitting up on the edge of my seat the entire time. This wasn't like a lay back and lounge type of watch. This was an engaged watch for me. What was it that put in particular OPS, the Overdose Prevention Society, on your radar? And when did you know that you were onto something powerful as it is?
Well, for me, I've also worked in the neighborhood for many years, and when I moved to New York in 2016 is when the records were kind of going off the charts in the downtown east side, and so I was kind of watching from a distance as lots of folks that I'd used to work with, like Ronnie, and people I cared about were passing away or losing loved ones. So the community, has meant a lot to me, and I really wanted to get back and try and capture what was going on. And when I got back, Ops is kind of fully running, but it was like the first place in this crisis that said, you know what, we're not going to sit around and wait. We're going to do whatever we can here, and kind of in the face of what was government inaction and people not really knowing how to handle this. In the face of that, just opened up this site, and at that time they were unsanctioned and technically illegal. So it was a courageous act by the community. So that was like the main reason, is kind of this is where all these responses. I mean, Insight was long established, but when Insight was trying to get shut down by Stephen Harper in the Supreme Court, they beat the government of Canada to win in the Supreme Court, which was great. But along with that came a bunch of regulations that made it virtually impossible to legally open another site in Canada. And so it was a real act of bravery, which led the charge to open a bunch of these sites here in Vancouver and across Canada. Yeah. And the main thing also was that I'd worked with Ronnie at Insight before. I'd known Sarah for years. I hadn't met Trey before, but knew lots of the participants there as well and the staff. So it felt like they knew who I was. There was a level of trust there that's needed to film in a place like this. They knew that I was going to put the people there first and not try and get in the way of any services. And it's also a unique space. It was it's a real community vibe in there, and having worked in the neighborhood, it's definitely something I just didn't want to focus on, the tragedy of it, which is horrific, but also wanted to capture, the beautiful humanity that I knew existed. And I felt like Ops really captured that for me. And it was a real reflection of the community as a whole.
Yeah, I mean it's the beautiful humanity. What a way to put it. You connect with the people in this film, and I mean even in the press kit for the film, you know, describe it as a group of misfits, artists, and drug users operating a renegade safe injection site in the downtown East Side. An intimate portrait of a community fighting to save lives and keep hope alive, which I think is a beautiful way to put it. Ronnie, this was an opportunity for you, I think, through the film, and you really do open up about it to talk about the emotional impact or the heaviness. I can't remember your exact words in the film, but in one of your comments, you say that you've sort of volunteered. Staff and volunteers here have sort of signed up to go to a tough place. You've almost signed up to carry or to help shoulder people's loads, and ultimately, by the end of this documentary, you look and you wonder how sustainable this is with regards to the people that are volunteering their time. I mean, how do you make your way through a day or a week where literally people's lives are hanging in the balance on an almost daily basis? Lives are literally being saved every single day.
I appreciate the question. I appreciate you pointing that out because we do sign up, we do willingly step into the space because it's meaningful and because it's important and because it's necessary. But that doesn't mean that it's not difficult and demanding, and that it's very costly on the people who show up. And burnout is real, and low staff turnover is real. And so I would say I've experienced that myself. I've very much, experienced burnout and had to take time away or work in short increments. You know, it's a real thing.
It's hard to, I guess, try to imagine where this goes. The numbers are up year over year with regards to human beings whose lives are lost as a result of drug poisoning or overdose. I know that the film goes a long way. Again, I don't want to sort of say too much. I want people to make sure they check it out. But there's a lot of talk about safe supply. And Trey, when it comes to, if you were able to write a solution up here, I would imagine we talk about legislation and funding and health resources and safe supply. What would be your most important point? What would you like the average Canadian, what would you like elected officials to be focusing on as we address this opioid crisis?
I always requote Ops Executive Director Sarah Blythe and Ops founder. We need lots of different options for lots of different people. There's no one clear one-size-fits-all solution. Safe supply is one of the options that could help a lot of people, for those drug users who maybe aren't ready to stop or maybe don't want to stop. At least they would be getting some sort of.
I think we might have lost Trey. So let me put the same question in front of Colin. Colin, there's obviously, I know the reality here that people might not know as well is that Ops is just right now opening a new site. There's a sort of a backstory here that they've been bumped around and moved a little bit, and Ronnie can maybe comment on that too. But I'm curious to know for your take, as someone who's immersed himself in this story, has told the story, and understands what's happening here. You pay attention to developments, to political action, and all that kind of stuff. What do you think? I mean, with regards to get a more permanent spot for this, with regards to try to turn this tide, with regards to address in meaningful fashion this opioid crisis across Canada, so long as a policy and adequate, safe supply availability isn't changing for now, what do you think is the short-term answer, and what would you like to see longer term?
Yeah, I think I agree with Trey, is that we're in a new world now. It was hard enough for people to go into abstinence-based recovery before, and now we're in fentanyl, which is that much harder. And I think if you look at a place like Switzerland that really, after they opened their site in the 80s, really kind of leaned into harm reduction and all these sorts of things and offered a safe supply and opiate-assisted therapy. And, they give away free regulated clean heroin. Fentanyl never had a market to enter there, so we don't see the catastrophe that we have here where things move a lot slower. And I think, there's lots of organizations that are able to provide safe supplies, and there's evidence behind it that shows it's working. And I think that it's better if we as a society can educate ourselves and learn more about this, that it isn't just about enabling drug users, and it isn't about just giving people drugs, that this is, science and evidence-based approaches that are working. And the more we as a public familiarize ourselves with this and understand and see, hopefully what movies like this show is that it's not as simple, drugs are bad and you shouldn't do them. It's not that simple. And we need to open our minds and think outside the box. And the more that we can do that, the more that the decision makers and, governments are able to act with hopefully the same mobilization that we did with COVID,
Yeah, hearing you talk about that, and Ronnie, I want to ask you about this. We'll get back to Trey as soon as we can, because I want to give him an opportunity to finish his thought as soon as we get his signal back. But Ronnie, you've seen the rhetoric from politicians, and certainly, and like Colin was just saying, a lot of people view these as sort of like free drugs, or I see people describe it as drug dens, and like, oh, is this how we're going to address this crisis? Is just by giving people free drugs, giving people illegal drugs. It's hard. And I don't know if there's, perhaps it means expending too much political capital. I don't know what it is. A lot of people, from perhaps the safety of their own experience or from their own privilege, have a hard time wrapping their mind around the idea of safe supply and how it can actually be an effective tool in actually saving lives and actually addressing this crisis. For the average Canadian, not somebody immersed in harm reduction, not somebody that has lived experience like you do and many others in this film, but what's the argument for safe supply? Like, what would you say to the average person? This is why we need to do it. This is the evidence that it'll work.
Well, I think we have to look at the evidence that we do have, and the evidence and the data that we do have is prohibition, and it has not worked. It distinctly has not worked, and we need to accept that and admit it and stare that straight in the face, that what we've done doesn't work. And so then what are we doing, or what can we do? When and part of the limitation of prohibition is that we don't understand addiction very well. We don't understand mental health all that well. And so prohibition has been a major contributor to that limitation. And as people access these services, which are increasingly normalized in the downtown east side, we begin to understand the role that substances such as opioids or stimulants play in people's mental health, for that assists their mental health. And we need to begin to normalize understanding it as a medical experience, primarily. I don't want to limit that. People use substances every day to make themselves feel different. Coffee, sugar, all of those things make people feel different. And so, we do have to acknowledge the role that these substances play in especially in the realm of trauma. And that's both physical trauma and psychological trauma, and supporting people through their experiences of that.
The film does an amazing job, and Colin, I'll leave it vague because I think people need to see it for themselves. But the impact of hearing people's personal stories as they're at ops, as they're talking to the volunteers and the staffers, and opening up and sharing their stories, and oftentimes sharing their trauma, it is so enlightening as a viewer, as an audience member, to understand what has drawn so many people to that space. Trey, we've got you back, and while we still have a signal, I want to get back to you to give you a chance to finish your thought. You were quoting Sarah. You were talking about safe supply. You were talking about political policy, political will, and how we can address this crisis in meaningful fashion.
Yeah, there needs to be lots of different options for lots of different people. If I could see anything, it would be safe supply, more drug testing available. So in Vancouver, we have a spectrometer which can test the drugs. I'd like to see that regular, like a spot 24 hours where someone could get drug testing. And lastly, detox on demand. One of the hardest things I see working with someone on a street level is when they say, hey, you know what? They have a moment where they talk to me and they say, Trey, I'm feeling done. Like I want to quit. I'm thinking about detox, and then I wish there was some way that I could get them fast tracked into detox. The reality is, in Vancouver, when someone wants to do detox access, it's up to a 2-week wait before they can get in. And that window of making that decision is like this big. It's like so small. By the time they have their detox access, they've changed their mind. So unfortunately, the reality of it is I have to teach people how to lie and manipulate the system, where if they really want detox on demand, they have to go to an emergency department, lie, get sectioned under the Mental Health Act, use specific language. I have a plan. This is how I'm going to do it. Make up some lie about how they're going to go jump off the Lionsgate Bridge or something. Then they'll get sectioned into a mental health unit, either in St. Paul's or VGH. And then from there, they have to advocate for themselves to get transferred to a detox facility or second stage treatment facility. That's the reality of it. So I'd like to see some sort of detox on demand available within Metro Vancouver, so that I don't have to tell people to lie to the system to get what they want when they need it.
It's powerful stuff. Colin, ultimately, what do you hope? I mean, the film, the world premiere tonight on the West Coast at DocSec. Congratulations. Obviously, a huge night for you and everybody involved. And then I know on Friday, when this screens at NorthwestFest, you'll have a captive audience as well. Ultimately, aside from just a majorly eye-opening experience, I mean, this is the type of film that you walk with. It's impossible for this to not impact your perspective. But ultimately, what do you hope that the viewer takes from this?
Yeah, firstly, I appreciate all the kind words about it, and I think you just said it. For me, is just impacting people's perspective. I'm obviously a strong proponent of this sort of work, but I really appreciate that it's new to a lot of people. And so this is an observational documentary. I didn't want to have interviews, and I wanted to kind of give a chance for an audience to really feel what it's like on these front lines and think about things for themselves. It doesn't try and explain anything. It just kind of walks people through what it's like. And obviously, you can only capture so much, but I think it really shows the devastation on this community and also the incredible response. And for me, I wanted to just show, these are a lot of active drug users that are doing more for their community than I think most of us are, and are some incredible humans that I think we need to acknowledge. And I hope that shifts, the way we view this issue and drug users and drug use, and that it's a complicated stuff that we need to really, I think, expand our horizons about and what we think about this stuff.
That's Colin Askey, who you wrote, directed, produced, edited. I mean, I think you did it all in this film, Love in the Time of Fentanyl, right? It's just an absolutely marvelous piece of work. It's heartbreaking. It is heart-filling, and it's an absolute must-watch. I implore you to watch this. We've been talking to Trey Helten as well, and Ronnie Grigg. Ronnie, my brother, I don't know if you know or not, Kyle works down at Insight, and I texted him about 1 a.m, and I said, I'm going to be talking to Ronnie tomorrow, and he said, it makes my heart surge to know that you're connecting with him. I've learned a lot from him, work philosophy-wise, and I hope that means as much to you as it did to me to know that you've made such an impact on his life.
Yeah, it certainly does. Yeah, Kyle's a good friend and a great caregiver in this community. Yeah, so I appreciate the words very much.
You can check out more about what Ronnie's doing at Zero Block Society. And, of course, thanks to the three of you. Just a phenomenal conversation, and we're so grateful for your perspectives on this. Mad love and much respect to all of you and everybody that does the good work. You can check out Love in the Time of Fentanyl coming up on Friday at NorthwestFest. It's Canada's longest-running documentary film festival. Real Talk is proud to partner with NorthwestFest this year, and you can get your tickets. Check out availability at northwestfest.ca, including on Friday, that's May 13th, Love in the Time of Fentanyl, a timely look at the critical importance of safe injection sites and the controversy surrounding them. Thanks, gentlemen. Really appreciate it. Johnny, this is the type of thing, watch that movie, and then I just laid there in the dark last night. I watched it right before I went to bed. and I just laid there, and you try to, like, the one thing that occurred to me is I said I felt like I was able, like the filmmaker, Colin, it takes you in, and at a respectful but close like, I mean, like, you're right in there. Getting to know these people, hearing their stories. People are sharing, some people saying, I never thought I'd be here.
Yeah.
Other people are saying, I'm still here. I'm still alive because of this place.
Yeah. And I think here in Edmonton, maybe we're a little sheltered from it because it's all in one area. I lived in Vancouver for 7 years, and it's horrible. It's sad to see what's going on. And I think Trey said it best, like 2 weeks to get a detox when you're like, you've got the window is like making that decision is way less than an hour. But
somebody says, I'm open to doing it right now. You got to be able to do it right now, right?
It's ridiculous. That has to be shrunken a whole lot. And we have a friend who's struggling with addiction to methamphetamines right now who is just, she's in and out. Like, we don't know where she is right now, and she pops up every couple months. But when she pops up, she wants help, and she can't get it fast enough. And so there she goes. She disappears again. And then, that's just how it is. One day, maybe we won't see her again, right? But like, people have these instances where they want help and they need help, and it needs to be provided super quick.
Yeah, I'm seeing these comments on our chat, people talking about folks that have had a serious injury, for example. They might go to the hospital, they get on oxy or they get on certain painkillers, and it opens a door for them. They start self-medicating.
Sure.
A lot of people have the more we understand about this opioid crisis, we understand that it's impacting people from every walk of life.
Everybody.
In all communities across the country.
Yeah.
And of course, to a certain degree, Vancouver's downtown east side sees a disproportionate number of drug poisonings because of the population down there. There's a lot of people there. There are resources there, so people wind up there. Perhaps the climate's a little more forgiving, so perhaps people from across Canada are more drawn to be in Vancouver. That doesn't mean it's not an issue in other cities. It doesn't mean it's not an issue in the suburbs. It doesn't mean it's not an issue with people that make more or less than $100,000 a year. It doesn't discriminate.
It doesn't at all. It's just homeless people, dropouts, like Trey was saying, people out of work. Like, this girl we know had a good future ahead of her and made some mistakes and got sucked in, and yeah, it's just horrible.
I'm so grateful for an audience, by the way, that does heavy lifting with us, that wants to have these conversations. I look at the lineup for today. We're talking about abortion and safe supply.
Incredible comments today on the line, especially about this last conversation. We could have had a whole show on this, I think.
Yeah, I almost felt like I cut the conversation off early, and we kept him for more than a half hour.
We should have Trey in studio.
That would be amazing. I mean, that guy I love, he's like, have a great day at school. Then he goes back to talking about the opioid crisis. That's real life. Yeah. This is real life. Sponsors make these conversations happen, including the amazing teams at St. Albert and Sherwood Dodge. We sure appreciate their partnership in keeping real talk happening every single weekday morning. They can help you get into your dream car or your dream vehicle right now. You can get approved on their website. You can link to those under the sponsors tab on ours, RyanJesperson.com. Of course, you can also just go see them in person. St. Albert Dodge, I mean, it's virtually a brand new dealership, maybe a year old now. Absolutely beautiful in there. Lots of room to check out their inventory. And of course, Sherwood Dodge as well. You know where that is. They've got you covered on the Ram 1500, the Jeep Grand Wagoneer, and so much more at Sherwood and St. Albert Dodge. Our friends at Infinity Healthcare know that the last thing you want to be worrying about is your loved one's home care. You want to have the confidence that it's consistent, that it's respectful, that it's a perfect fit. They offer a unique and personalized combination of premier care and community-based services. It's easy to get in touch with them on their website, infinity-8.ca. Plus, on the website, you can browse their career opportunities. Are you a licensed practical nurse, a customer care navigator, maybe a healthcare aide? They're also hiring Infinity Healthcare ambassadors. You can work with families across the province to find a perfect fit for your loved one or their loved one's home care through Infinity Healthcare. If you happen to be lucky enough to be heading out of town, we recommend that you leave your car at Jet Set Airport Parking. If you're heading out of EIA, that's Edmonton's International Airport, you can save money by booking online today. It's $7 a day to park your car at the airport for travel all the way through till 2022, all the way through till the end of 2022. Book it now. It gives you 7 months or so in advance. Make sure you give yourself 24 hours. The promo code REALTALK gets you $7 a day parking at jetsetparking.com. Local Environmental, constantly growing its footprint. It seems like every couple of weeks on their Instagram or their Twitter account, they're introducing themselves to a new community like Whitecourt. I saw they're just hiring in Whitecourt. That's just one example. If you want to keep it local with a family-owned business that's concerned for your business's bottom line, partnership, most important to them, in recycling, water hauling, fencing, portable toilets, we recommend localenvironmental.ca. And of course, our friends at the Dairy Queens of Northwest Edmonton and Sherwood Park insist that you check out their summer blizzard menu, these blizzard treats for a limited time. I can't keep talking about this dirt pie blizzard treat without taking our little guy to go see it. The one with the gummy worms and the chocolate dirt. It's the most fun one, probably.
You say blizzard, you just smile.
You just smile. I like it. They still do the thing, hey? Back, remember back in the day, they turn it upside down before they give it to you, and I've always appreciated that. I think that takes guts. If the temperature was off just by 5 degrees,
I wonder if it's ever happened.
Just dump it right on. But that's their confidence. That's the Blizzard promise, baby, is that it's going to be perfect every time, including that cotton candy blizzard treat, which keeps catching my eye, too. These are the Dairy Queens in Sherwood Park at Baseline Road, plus in Northwest Edmonton at Palisades, Nemeo, Newcastle, and Westmount. I'm looking forward to tomorrow's show. Before we get to the leading edge here, I wanted to give everybody a heads up. Have you seen this new podcast? It's like top 10 in all the science podcast listings, and there's an Alberta connection to it. This is pretty cool. They're getting into the relationship between humans and the other animals on the planet.
Nice.
You know the one I'm talking about? And so this is a podcast, and you can show us the logo here, Johnny, if you want. We're going to talk to two of the hosts of this one, and this is like, you take a look at the history of humans and animals and the relationship on the planet, and for example, one of the recent ones I listened to, I was listening to their archive yesterday, like why we should actually celebrate insects, why insects are so important.
This is a big one that people ask me. They're like, oh, well, you don't eat meat. You're stepping on ants every day and stuff like that.
People give you that.
I think that's just the chain of command in the universe, is that, bigger things wipe out smaller things. I don't think you can stop that. But the other day, me and my wife were driving. We see a ladybug on the car. My wife is obsessed with ladybugs. It's ladybug season right now. They all come out in the spring and early summer. And, we had to stop and take it off and put it in the grass. But I understand you can't do that with everything.
I love it. We've got to get you to co-interview the co-hosts of Anthropomania. Anthropomania, the co-hosts are going to join us tomorrow, because I love it. I respect that. There's something. Ladybugs to me are one of the most underrated animals on planet Earth. They're actually super cool.
Yeah, well, like with spiders, do you kill spiders? Because it's a big bad luck thing. Like, it'll rain, you'll have bad
spiders
luck.
Are good, right?
But
for the most part,
yeah. But my wife's deathly afraid of them. So I'm like, how are you this plant-based, all living creatures lover, and then you're freaked out and run away from spiders?
Life's complicated, and that's the beautiful part of it, is that you just got to find what works for you and go with it. So Anthropomania, two of the hosts are going to join us tomorrow, and I'm really looking forward to that conversation. That's going to be a fun one. We always want to bring you, we say on Real Talk, news, politics, and pop culture, and so we'll get into the stuff that's grinding people's gears, or that politicians are focusing on, or public messaging around this, or a crisis there. But then every once in a while, we want to have a conversation that just everybody can just chill out, relax, enjoy, not think too hard, right? We ask you to do heavy lifting on days like today, and then we balance it out with some fun stuff. So that's coming up. Every Tuesday, also thanks to our friends at Leading Edge Physio, we take an opportunity to highlight an organization or group or a person, maybe an invention that's changing life for people. We call it the Leading Edge. And in the spotlight today, it's the team at Priority Printing. Yeah, that's right. This business has been open since 1986, and they've been proudly announcing they can print your logo on pretty much anything. So why are they featured in the Leading Edge today? Well, one of the reasons is their support for community. Priority Printing showcases local artists of the month in their desk calendars, and as well as endless events with charities in the community, like annual fundraisers, for example, for SCARS, that Second Chance Animal Rescue. Providing and donating promotional materials for events as well has been the reason they've connected with community so strongly over the past coming up on 40 years. Now, of course, they've got cutting-edge technology, and their design systems set them apart. They've earned a reputation for constantly adapting and changing in their industry. And perhaps most notably today, They've been a sponsor of Leading Edge's Run Wild race for 11 years, doing all the printage, all the signing, the signage and printing, the brochures, everything that's sent home with kids at school, even the banners at the finish line on race day. They run their employees in those races. They keep the water station going, and Robin Shapelsky, who steers that team there, a long-time Run Club attendee, put on by Leading Edge to train for Run Wild. So Priority Printing and their team, basically a shining example of what it means to be a leader in your industry and what it means to truly give back to community. Today we celebrate Priority Printing in The Leading Edge, presented by Leading Edge Physiotherapy. Life shouldn't hurt. Now, also coming up on tomorrow's show, we mentioned the Anthropomania podcast team, the duo, and I'm really looking forward to that. But it's also this week an anniversary of a major Western Canadian wildfire. We're going to talk to civic, municipal, Indigenous leadership about what they've learned and how their community is rebuilding after the Chuck Egg blaze. Plus, an inside view by way of a photographer, Leah Hennel, into the hospitals through the pandemic. A powerful new book will take you there.
Real Talk is hosted by Ryan Jesperson, technical producer John Hicks, managing director Josh Dunford, account coordinator Lauren Sterlego, general manager Katie Cook-Chivers, website design Mike Johnston, voiceover by me, Carrie Skelton. Real Talk's editorial board is Supriya Dwivedi, Ahmed Ali, Ann Castleman, Corey Hogan, Harmon Candola, Catherine O'Neill, and Chris Henderson. Member Emerita Julie Rohr. Real Talk is recorded in Edmonton, Alberta on Treaty 6 territory, the traditional and ancestral territory of the Cree, Dene, Blackfoot, Saulteaux, and Nakota Sioux, home to Métis settlements and the Métis Nation of Alberta. Real Talk is the flagship property of Relay Communications Group Incorporated. All rights reserved. For more, check out ryanjesperson.com.